I'm gonna do something a little boring today. Although to be fair, pretty much every video I post is boring. But this one I feel a little bad about, since it's a react video.
Hello, selectors, and welcome to my PowerPoint presentation talking about how you can make any deck good in WeCross. Basically, how you can win with any center you possibly want to. Alright, first up, let's talk about centers, right? There's definitely some better centers that are better than others. However, using kind of this deck building trick that I've learned while I was GP grinding, I found sort of a formula that just kind of makes any deck, it makes it above average, right? So you can take any center that you want, your favorite center, probably use this formula. You'll end up being pretty good at winning with it. So here's the formula. Okay, basically this, right? Take it in.
Kill your opponent with the Signies. Yep, that makes enough sense. Draw the guards. Of course. I really I really don't think the servants are a well designed card. Drawing and excavating. Consistency. Yes. Consistency good. Although you should also probably mention that consistency is good. Because believe it or not, something I learned from Yu-Gi-Oh! If your deck has a win condition and can get to it consistently, it means it's a good deck most of the time. Burst these. Avoid them when you attack. You're just explaining game mechanics at this point. Pick a turn to win by. Who the fuck tries to win in turn 1? Make a turn 0 to X game plan. That makes enough sense, although I have just been winging my turns. I never considered it should matter what I should be trying to do different things on different turns. I mean, that's sort of something I've kind of understood for a while now playing Alpha Pure. If I'm going first, I try to mulligan so that I get Foras and or Malvas. And then going second, I try to draw little Oni and Stolash instead. But afterwards, I don't have a game plan. So maybe I gotta think about that. What kind of game
Great.
plan? I don't know. When you lose, learn from it instead of making excuses. Hey, the instead of saying you got sacked because the opponent had all the correct hand traps, fucking try to understand what exactly happened.
Now you guys are a pro WeCross player. Congratulations, that's the end of this
Alright,
video. Everyone's happy. Clap,
I'm
clap,
gonna
claps.
go to
Obviously, we probably
rank
do
now.
need to talk about this a little bit more. This is basically everything I think you need to do in WeCross in order to win any game of WeCross ever. If you're doing anything that is not on this window right here, you are doing something that people would consider not great. There's a lot of things that you could be doing, like drawing cards, which is great, right? That's part of the consistency thing. But enter burning, right? Like, unless you're doing that specifically for a good reason that's on one of these things, probably just a cool little thing you can do, but not necessarily game winning. All of these things here, in my opinion, win games, so when you're building
Only burn
decks,
the
you should
opponent's
probably do
center
it.
if you're
For example,
trying to win
turning
and
your
trying to
Elrig
avoid any
sideways, turning
attack
your
phase
Signy
since they haven't
sideways. This is a
activated
way to
yet.
kill your opponent. You should focus on that. I know it seems like it's basic, but it is how you
That's
win a game
actually
of
a reason why some
recross.
people
What
fire
are
off
other
their
ways to
attack
win
phase things
recross? Well,
early,
you got these things called life bursts, right? You want to burst them, and you also want to make sure your
which I think is
opponent's
really
bursts don't
interesting.
stop your
There's
game
so
plan.
much
Again,
dynamicism in
very basic,
Recross.
but there are ways to build your decks and game plans to make sure that you are doing those things correctly. Another one is guards, right? We all love them. We
You
all
know, I think a reason why I don't think too much about turns and why you should have a game plan depending on turns is because of Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm so used to games only having 2 to 3 turns, where grind games become just slog fests that are ridiculously unfun. That yeah, games, other card games where games last longer. I mean, this is something I understand in Advance Wars and chess, other turn-based games that I play in. I guess it's just not something I quite understand in. I mean, Genius Invocation as well, right? That's another card game I play. The card game for Genshin. I don't think about what to do on the individual rounds there as well, because for the most part, uh, or at the very least, I've internalized it but have never thought about it out loud. With my burning deck, for example, turn one, I set up my summons. Turn two, I prepare for Shangling's burst. And then turn three, I try to kill everyone with Nahida. Turn three and beyond. Uh, and that's the game plan. Round per round. It's something I've internalized but never thought was some sort of fundamental card gaming strategy. Because something like that is so straightforward. The concept of rounds never turned to my attention because it just reminded me of in Yu-Gi-Oh! First, I set up this thing and then I do that thing and then that's the end result. People call those combos, but those really are not combos. That is just playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It just feels intuitive to call it a combo because in literally every other card game, doing that many things is warranted to be called a combo. But a combo is only a combo if it uses multiple specific pieces. When you play Dormouse in order to end on White Binder, Accode Talker, and a Red Ransom and Accode Talker on field with a Red Ransom, with a no, what's the trap card called again? Whatever the trap cards are called and the field spell. That is simply Dormouse doing what it's been printed to do. That's not a combo. When I discard 5 mana in order to send 2 other materials from my hand, that is still not a combo. It is simply the card doing what it's supposed to do by using extra cards in your hand. What will constitute as a combo is when you activate 2 very specific cards to do something very specific, uh, which is very rare. There are not that many combo decks in Yu-Gi-Oh because there aren't. Combos are inherently inconsistent because it requires you to draw specific important pieces. And decks that do have combos like those usually are not very competitive for very obvious reasons. An example would be Labyrinth. Labyrinth is a combo deck because you need multiple specific pieces, such as, for example, what's the name of that card? Dimensional Barrier plus Labyrinth. What's her name? Labyrinth Butler. Equals instant win as long as the opponent isn't on a link based strategy. Or in older formats, there's a 2 card combo you can do with Goblinberg, I believe, that allows you to easily funny to say that considering Ryzeal exists now. But yeah, Goblin Bird plus another card I can't remember the name of equals 2 level force as for rank 4 monster materials of your choice. Or maybe there's even like a consistent one you can do to get Shockmaster out. Ooh.
We all hate them. You try to draw them, and you make sure your opponent doesn't have them in hand sometimes, or is unable to use them. If you tax it or something like that. That's a great way to win a game of Wheat Cross. Another one's consistency. Look at that Haniel. Look at that guy. He's got a full grip of cards in his hands. This is a great way to win Wheat Cross. When you have consistency, you will always, always have a better deck than not. Really, 1/4 of your deck probably should be put towards consistency. If
I
you're
don't
not
agree.
doing that, then I think your deck might be failing some basic measures. It's a lot, I know. It's surprising. The next one is when you want to pick a turn to win by, right? And then you make a game plan around.
In Yu-Gi-Oh, you don't want to dedicate so much of your deck to consistency. I literally was watching a video by Out of Characters talking about the case for playing bricks. At some point, you gotta focus on power. And I think consistency can only get you so much in Wii Cross. For the most part, as long as every individual card is powerful enough, then it shouldn't matter. Especially since there aren't really anything like a brick in Wii Cross. It's not like you have to play a specific Signy or something in order to activate another Signy. Well, I mean, I guess you could count Morriga's thingy, the Morriga plus 4 ass combo. That's a thing, I guess.
That making that thing possible, right? We had this thing called strike theory once upon a time on the channel. If you have not seen it, check it out. That's a great way to sort of understand whether or not your deck is making the bare minimum requirements to win a game of Wii Cross. And the last one is when you lose, you should learn from it instead of making up excuses or bad beat stories. This is, I guess, optional. This is my personal take on it. I don't like it when people do these types of things. I have always prided myself to learn from my mistakes and be open-minded, rather than just explain why I lost the game. So I think that's also a really great way to start winning games of Wii Cross. Just wanted to throw it in. Going up next, let's just real quick talk
That's
about
just
the
that's just life advice. When you lose, it's best to try to understand exactly what happened and use hindsight. If it truly was an unwinnable situation, it's good that you at least took the time to understand that it really was an unwinnable situation. But other times, you observe and you find that maybe you've made some mistakes or that there are things you could have done better. In which case, either way, you still gain something other than just mauling and being angry. Oh god, it's the Blue Archive strategy.
turn game plan, right? Starting 0 to X. This varies from deck to deck, right? But it's a very important part of the deck building process. If you can't visualize, especially with this game, which is so turn and pace oriented, if you can't visualize a way to win the game, then your deck will not win the game. So, here's just an example, right? This is, for example, some kind of mid-range type of thing to throw together. I like the Blue Archive cards, so I'm using Blue Archive mostly for these examples. This is, I think, a
I
great
don't.
way to sort of be like, okay, I get what I'm doing here. I'm
Also, this video is 9 months ago. The Blue Archive cards are old and they're still so good.
moving forward, and eventually I will win this game by doing the following things. If I gain resources, then I can't be hated out of the game. If I do damage, I will win the game. If I mill, I get an extra damage and I win the game. If I protect my own life cloth a little bit, I can probably outlast some aggro decks and win the game. This is just, again, an example of a game thing. It may change from deck to deck, but really what it's going to change from is archetypes. Alright, in Wecross, we
Archetypes?
have about 5 different archetypes to choose from.
Oh!
You have aggro. You also have mid-range. You also have
My favorite.
control decks. And you have this new one, tempo. I call it new because we haven't really been able to do it very well. But recently, just recently, we started putting this formula together about how
What
to
the
win
fuck is
with
tempo?
tempo
I play
decks,
Yu-Gi-Oh!
and they're
That
starting to
doesn't
show up and
exist
be
in our
very
game.
powerful. I think a very they're sort of almost supplanting Control's role in the meta. I think they're a good deck. The last one that we could
You're
do
either
is
winning or you're
combo
fucking
decks.
dead.
Now, maybe not, because Takaro Tomy really hates the idea of combo decks.
They
So
really
there
do.
hasn't. I think theoretically there could be combo decks in this game. Is there combo decks? Not until Takara Tomy decides that there is, and it's been a couple of years, so I don't know. They seem very
How hard is
conscious
it to
about
say
not
Takara
having that be a
Tommy?
thing. Anyways, let's talk about some of these things. I think when I've been building these decks for GP grinding and I've been making a lot of successful decks, I have made almost a checklist in my head about building these decks. I do these without any exception. And when people ask me to review their decks, I look at this and I decide what kind of deck is it. Once I decide the archetype, I look at this and I have my checklist, and if it does not do one of these things, or it's missing multiple parts, I say it's an unsuccessful deck. This is what I think you need to do. You need to decide what archetype you are, and then you need to go for this type of checklist. So, if you're an aggro deck, you are a dash deck. There is no other aggro deck. You are always a dash deck. Anything that is not as fast as dash is not an aggro deck. It's a bad mid-range deck. That's just how it goes. Aggressive mid-range decks aren't good. So, don't be dangerously mid-range. Be an aggressive aggro deck. Your goal will be to win on turn 3 and 4. This
Isn't that what my Alpha deck is? It's trying to kill fast while trying to not die, but it doesn't have any defenses, which is what aggro typically do. They forego all defense in favor of just punching the opponent super fast and hard early and hoping that the opponent dies. Because if they don't die, then that's their lose con, and that is the opponent's win con against aggro. The problem is, I need to wait until turn fucking 8 to get to level 4. And like I don't have enough aggressive capabilities. It's really why I've been considering just moving on since I've gotten tired of playing Alpha Pure. Uh, I've always understood that Alpha Pure was very similar to my early game phase when playing Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was trying really hard to make Megaliths and Harpy Ladies work. And to some extent, I guess, the Amazonas as well. But at some point, I'm going to be looking to actually win. When that happens, I'll be doing as the fighting game players call it, trying to find a character that fits my hand. This sounds really pervy in the context of WeCross.
is not like this top part is not necessarily the check mark part. It's just you should do it, right? Like this is the goal of the game. Again, WeCross is a turn-paced game where if you are not explaining what turn you're winning on, your deck is not doing its function. Dash should be winning on turn 3 at its best, and if it has to, it will begrudgingly win on turn 4. Its goal will be to open 3 lanes a turn until they win or they die.
Does this guy understand how turn counting works? When it says win on turn 3, does it actually mean turn 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 for turn 4?
This is to say that aggro decks don't necessarily have long game potential, but in their short game,
Come on, there are very few games where turns are counted as my turn, my turn, my turn. Magic the Gathering and Advance Wars do it like that. But like chess does it, Yu-Gi-Oh does it, and WeCross seems to do it as well. At least that's how they count turns on this client. And that I like that. That's intuitive. It makes sense. Of course, the turn would pass when the player ends their turn, because that's what a turn is. Someone taking their turn. A turn isn't everyone's turn, not unless it's Yu-Gi-Oh, where one turn is always going to be our turn, which is awesome,
They
impressive.
should be able to open up 3 lanes or offer 3 Signy damage every turn without fail. They should also be able to deal extra crush or damage. I put an asterisk on
Or
that.
your
If
mama.
you overload on that type of effect, because you're like, I'm doing the aggro thing, you will lose. Again, I want to remind you that your really important thing to think of is this game plan type of thing. I didn't do the aggro deck here, but you should be thinking how to get to exactly lethal. It shouldn't be over lethal.
This is a reason why I think this guy doesn't understand turns. You can't you can't get level 2 Signies on turn 2 because your rig is still just level 1. So what this should be saying is turn 1/2, turn 3/4, and then turn 5/6, etc. Because yes, the average turn count is 10 for Wecross.
It should be exactly lethal. And how to do it reliably. So,
Because like if
if
you
you
could get to that point in that blue archive spreadsheet in turn 5, what the hell?
just fill your deck with nothing but life crush, burst, refresh, that damage stuff, you probably will lose the game because you're just not interacting at all at that point. The last part is to be
That's
redundant.
true with
What do
any
I mean
card
by
game.
this? Yes, there are ways that you could put more filtering in your deck, like I said earlier, but also aggro decks tend to just be redundant, right? With the idea of, well, if half my deck is open 3 lanes and the other half is deal like crush damage, right? Not exactly those ratios, but something like that. You end up being redundant. It doesn't matter if the opponent discards you down, you will naturally draw your 2 cards, and then those will happen to be your game plan. That is the pro of aggro decks, whereas it's not super great, the longevity, it also is really hard to disrupt. So, it's consistent. Here's an example of what I think is probably the best aggro deck in the format right now. It's Dash Anj. I think this deck is a menace. I think this deck could randomly win
Eldora?
tournaments all the time and just will, no matter what, sometimes RNG, go on a hot streak and take down big events. This is my most scared deck. I would consider it the boogeyman of the format, even. Let's talk about what's in this deck. All right, so we asked for win on turn 2 and 3, or 3 and 4, excuse me, and they open 3 lanes until they die or win. All right, let's see if that's there. Boom, there you go. Look at all these ways that you can open lanes, right? It is a lot. Now,
No, it's the Niji Sanji cards. I haven't read those yet. I refuse to play any collabs. That's free? It's just an enters ability. And it's on a level 1. Elrig.
granted, it's not half your deck here. It is definitely a fourth, right? Including a majority of your Elrig deck is currently occupying the ability to open lanes. Next up, we want to see that extra damage be possible. What do we got here? Boom. There it is. There's a lot of it. Normally, decks have some amount of extra damage, but not nearly this much, right? Anj herself offers extra damage. Chigusa offers extra damage. So does the piece that mills your opponent out offers extra damage. This is all really great ways. And by when I say extra damage, by the way, I do mean more than just 3 Elrigs and, or sorry, 3 Signy and an Elrig. I'm talking about multiple damages. Next, let's talk about consistency or redundancy. We see these. All right, so we've got more pieces here that help you filter exactly what you need. Granted, this deck also has a little bit of a feature where it is trying to do things like, for example, be defensive a little bit, right? So that's where some of this other stuff is going. But you can see there's quite a lot in this deck dedicated to basically always hitting consistency. And you don't need a ton of consistency when you're planning to win by turn 4 or die. So that's the aggro deck. Very easy to understand, very easy to dash. Let's talk about the next one, which is mid-range. So how do we play a mid-range deck? Well, your goal here is to probably win on turn 5. It can potentially win on turn 4. I don't think so. Normally, it's winning on turn 5 currently. So, what is our 3 check marks that we're trying to make for this deck? First is the ability to open 2 to 3 lanes a turn forever. That is a remarkably different statement than the aggro deck. The aggro deck is not trying to open up
Mid-range is what I've been trying to make
forever.
Alpha.
It's forever
what I've
as
been
until
trying
it
to design
dies
Alpha
or
to
wins.
be.
This is saying, I don't care if
More often
somehow
than not,
we end up going
really
to turn
oriented
8.
towards aggro.
I will still open up 2 to 3 lanes
Those are just what the
every
Black
turn
Demon Signies
until I win.
do.
This is how mid-range functions. It also offers some amount of additional damage. Markedly less additional damage than aggro, but might be more consistent because it has a little longer time to get those pieces, and it toolboxes probably a little bit more efficiently as well. And it's got the ability to save 1 to 2 extra damage, right? This is aside from whenever I say it's saving itself from extra damage. I'm not talking about the normal arts or assists that are defensive. I'm talking about some other metric to do so. Let's look at a mid-range deck. Here we go. Here's Shiriko, right? I said I was going to work mostly with Blue Archive, and I'm intending to do so because there's a couple of repeat cards for these things. So here's Shiriko. I think it's a really good mid-range deck in the meta right now, and I think it is potentially something you want to bring to your locals and win the game. Let's talk about what's
Blue
up first.
Archive is still in the
opening
fucking
2
meta.
to 3 lanes a turn forever. How do we do that?
Fucking everyone complaining about Snake Eye lasting like. Okay, it lasted 13 months, didn't it? Snake Eye format was 13 months, maybe even longer, if I'm remembering correctly. I was only there for the last month. His Ryzeal Malice came out pretty much immediately after.
Well, here's some examples. So, Izuna has the ability to basically always come out of your enter and then always be able to assassin the opponent, right? That's a consistent damage there, no matter what. Same thing with Shiriko, right? Shiriko offers the ability to constantly do S-Lancer and threaten a game-winning state. That is what's good about Shiriko, and we can see it here as a consistency piece. The other consistency piece, and I did not mark it here just because I didn't want to overload on check marks, is if you actually look at the deck, there is a lot of ways to open up damage, right? You also have the level 3s, you've got some Lancers, you've got another thing, level 3 that minus effects, right? There's a lot of ways to do it. You've also got your Ps to open it up. So there's quite a few ways, your assists too, quite a few ways to open up lanes here that will add to the consistency. As you can see, you can pretty much always open up 2, so adding one more card that can open up things will pretty much always consistently open up 3 in this deck. I just didn't want to check marks at all, because I didn't want to overload you guys, but that is also one way to do it. Let's look at the next piece, which is how do we offer additional damage in this deck? Well, simply put, here we go. There's 2 ways to do it. One's Mill, the other one is this other card called Wakumo. This is pretty common to see in mid-range.
Or I've never seen that before. A scare. Banish target level 1 and put the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck into their trash. Only 4?
Decks is that they'll offer some form of extra damage, either in the form of double crush or a mill damage, mill refresh, excuse me, and then they'll often have like one other card that could potentially do another damage, whether that's double crush or fancy double crush like it here is with Wakumo. That is up to your deck building discretion, but they'll often be able to toolbox it. Shiriko can toolbox very well. So it's sort of like on demand as they need it, right? They don't always go for it, but they have the ability to do so to kind of help end the game. Lastly, how do we stop additional damage from happening that isn't just our assists? Well, here we go. Yep, that's actually quite a few, right? Mid-range is not completely aggressive. It also is very defensive. It's often offering a board state that is a mixed defense and a mixed offense. So you can see with Yuka here and Mari here, things that don't die will save you life cloth. It's as simple as that. It's very simple math. It doesn't always work out that way. There's Assassin, there's Lancer in this world, but if you can stop some amount of damage in any of your turns, then that helps you win that race. In essence, I don't think mid-range is a deck that's trying to control the pace of the game, but it is trying to brute force its way through to an end game state. It is going to be different than tempo, which we'll talk about in a little bit at the end. That is kind of more of a pace-based game. But this has a definitive game plan, it's got a consistent game plan, toolboxes, those types of things. So, that's the mid-range deck. What's another archetype that we can talk about? Control. Control is very different in Wecross than it is in other decks, or other deck-building games anyways. Other deck-building games, Control often is this very reactive, very stall, very slow deck that tries to win. It is still slow, but not nearly as slow in our game. If you play a slow game of Wecross, you'll just lose the game. So we're very much more proactive Control decks. We're looking to win on turn 6 or 7. I genuinely don't know if it's possible in Wecross, at least our current meta, to win a game of Wecross past those turns. Might not be possible. Especially if you're building decks like I showed earlier, that are designed to win the game basically no matter what. Control is marketed by these types of deck building checkboxes. It wants to offer safe, burst immune, or burst resistant damage every turn. This is to say that one of the most natural ways to do that is open a single lane for your attacks, and then be able to attack once with your Signing, and then once with your Elrig. Now, there are ways that you can make that number go up. It doesn't have to be 2 damage a turn. It can be 2 damage a turn, but it doesn't have to be. For example, if you're playing a deck that has the ability to make its Elrig swing twice, you can play a control deck with that. There was controlled Tamas often in the back of the day, which would often offer 3 damage that was very burst resistant because its Elrigs, was swinging twice. You can also theoretically do it with a red control deck where you offer something like Hanyo, where you open 1 lane, but you give that thing double crush, right? Now you're offering 2 damage that's burst resistant because you don't really care what the other bursts are after this, and you do an Elrig swing, that's your 3 damage. So, basically any kind of way to attack the opponent without, purposefully putting yourself in harm's way for crackback bursts is a very good tactic that you should then lean into control with. It has a lot of defensive measures, more than mid-range for sure, more than tempo for sure. As you'll see in a second, there's a ton of it. This is to help it get to turn 6 or 7, where it can win that grind game. It also, I wanted to put down that it grinds very, very well, but I figured killing resources, gaining resources, kind of the same thing. It's looking to destroy your opponent's resources while simultaneously gaining more resources of its own.
Gaining resources means you're able to play more. Playing more still means you have to play against the opponent's resources. Killing resources means preventing the opponent from being able to play the game. If there's anything I learned from Yu-Gi-Oh! It's that is usually the better play style, and it is why a lot of games are really averse to denying the opponent resources. Think of Street Fighter's Dizzy mechanic. Dizzy is killing resources. It is a very powerful resource it kills. The ability to control your player character. And ever since past Street Fighter 2, the Dizzy mechanic has not really existed that prevalently. More often than not, play styles and play patterns of the fighters in Street Fighter and many other fighting games are all centered around gaining resources better than your opponent rather than killing their own resources. Otherwise, you get to a game that's really fast like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where the only way to play is to make sure your opponent can't play themselves.
Whether that's enter, whether that's cards in hand, whether that's like some kind of snowballing effect, these are all marketed things that control decks are looking to do.
That's
and
why
I would be
aggro
looking
decks
to see
kill
where
resources.
the give and take are in my deck. If I was building a control
Whereas
deck, if I didn't see that, and it was just
more
stall,
often than not
period,
does
right? Like it's just
gain
big walls.
resources
I don't
more.
think that's a good control deck. You should probably go back to the drawing board. The last one is that it needs to have a final winning turn. I know that's strange for a control deck that's stalling out, but the goal here is you need to be able to have one turn where you can do upwards to 5 or 6 damage even, right? It feels very like that's the realm of a dash deck, dash aggro deck, but it shouldn't just be the dash aggro deck. A control deck needs to have a turn where it clinches victory from the opponent, and like it's basically deny, 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 now I win the game. So if you don't have a way to build that final penultimate turn, you're not a great control deck, and you need to do it. That's kind of a last thing that I included on here. The rest pretty much only have 3 things. Anyways, let's see some of these things in action. Here's a control deck. Just won the GP. It is Azusa, right? So we should see what Azusa's offering here. I actually spoiled some check marks. The first thing that we're offering is that safe damage, right? Azusa herself opens up 1 lane and then also is able to swing as an Elrig. So you're always doing that safe 2 damage a turn. The deck itself doesn't really feature a ton of ways like other control decks have in the past to be able to swing with your Elrig twice, for example, to up the amount of damage that's done, but this is one way to get safe damage in Weecross, and I wanted to show it off. The other way is Phalaris, right? A refresh is a safe damage. You're not going to worry about bursts from it because it's a refresh, so you have the way to potentially rack up some extra damage there, and also it's safe, right? That's something that's kind of important to mention. The next one is defensive measures. Look at how many more check marks we have for this one. Not only are we running like 6 like the other one, we are running way more than 6. We are running a total ways to defend it. You'll see Hasumi is also on there. That's because Hasumi is often bonded in this deck, which means it's a level 2 12k, so it's often resistant to a lot of damage effects like opening up lanes or getting Lancer through, stuff like that. So you'll end up seeing that Hasumi will end up being a very safe way to put out on the field, put out yourself a 12k, 12k, 12k board, maybe even higher than that, and stall out some damage. Again, if your Signy aren't killed, you're very likely to not take damage there. The last one here is going to be the last thing we're talking about, resource messing around with, gaining resources. It's a little cheating because it's like 2 of those in one, so there's a lot of check marks happening here. But as you can see, this is something that we're doing often. Hasumi is a great example here. Blowing up Enter is a really good way to do it. Discarding the opponent down is a really great way to do it. Ray is also a fantastic way, and I probably should have highlighted that one. Ray is able to draw you cards and discard your opponent. So there's a ton of ways to do it here as well. Probably should have put a check mark also on the piece over there, because those things give you the ability to draw cards too. So without any further ado, that's a control deck, right? You should be seeing these check marks show up in your deck. Yes, not everything is a check mark, right? There's also some damage output here. There's also some, like, playing around your opponents with Suzumi. But, like, that's just how it works in these decks, right? Like, you want to make sure that the bulk of your deck is check marked off with the things that I'm talking about. Lastly, I wanted to talk about that winning turn, right? This is 5 damage if you have the ability to put it out here. Not only can you use your Elrig to open up a hole, you can use your first Signy here to attack twice. You can use your Phalaris to do a refresh damage, and then you can use the Momoy I just put here because it could discard a card, right? And that's important. You can use the other card to bounce something and open up a hole and then attack through. This offers, again, the ability to deal 1, 2 damage in the front side, 3 off of Phalaris, 4 off of the open lane, and then 5 with your Elrig. So you should have some turn that you could potentially put together that is your winning penultimate turn in control decks. Moving right along, let's talk about tempo decks. So I think tempo decks, personally to me as a player, I believe tempo decks are the best version of the archetype that you can potentially do in Weecross. The reason being is that I think Weecross as a game design lends itself to tempo. Weecross is a game that, in my opinion, you win on a certain turn. And tempo is designed to have the best damage pace, aka it is the one archetype that I think can reliably make its win turn when it needs to be, and also control the opponent's win's turn to be a turn too late. In my opinion, that is probably the best way to play Weecross. Although I know some people would argue with me and say that control is the best way to play Weecross. Personally, I think this is it. Now, you'll notice that I have only one checkbox here, which is have the best damage pace. The entire concept of tempo is wrapped around having a better damage pace than your opponent. That may mean going faster than your opponent, but it also might mean slowing your opponent down. Something that I unlocked at the GP, I think, is I could see my opponent's life cloth, whether it was 5, 4, 2, 1, and I could know my pace, what it was supposed to be. How many lanes am I supposed to open? What am I supposed to do? When's the mill turn, right? These things all equate into having the best damage pace. So I'm going to break it down, make it a little bit more easier to understand. I think that having the best damage pace in WeCross is going to include the following sort of ideology here. You'll want to be able to cycle through your deck to find either your aggro or control tools, the things that are going to slow your opponents down, or speed your own game up. And you're also going to be doing your best to discard their guards and draw yours. Yes, sometimes you're going to mess with their enter, sometimes you're going to mess with their game plan by like stripping their hand down so they have limited resources that they can work with, and then that will inevitably cause them to stumble and allow you to win a game as well. Those are all sort of byproducts of the discard guards. It's really more important that you have guards and the opponent doesn't, because by virtue of that, you have a better win rate than your opponent. You're gonna be able to block more damage than they are, and so you'll just win the game pace. Again, put 2 examples on here just to sort of highlight what that could be. Now, let's talk and see what kind of deck we're working with. This is the deck that I ran at the GP. It took a 2nd place in Swiss and 10th place as well for me. And we'll talk about why this deck functions. There's a lot of check marks that you're going to see pop up in a second. The first one, when we're talking about it, is have the best damage pace. So we're going to be looking at specifically things that cause us to save on damage and our opponents to It'll allow us to not take damage while simultaneously push damage on the opponent, right? So I'm going to show just 2 examples here, right? We're looking for things that are not just like lane opening, but things that add damage to our timing. So things that increase our pace. Well, Mill does that, right? Mill allows us to increase the pace of damage output that we're doing. The other way that we take less damage is we have Signy on the field that don't die, and that will stop damage. The third way that we're going to do it is with Umir Clear. This freezes the Elrig. If the Elrig is frozen, it can't attack. Now, you might be saying, but Andrew, isn't that the same as having a guard, so you just draw a guard and you're good? And I would argue, no. And my reasoning is because this can be a 5th guard, and that's important, right? Stopping a 5th damage on a game is important. The second reason is, don't forget dash decks and control decks
freezing
often
Elrig
do
is a
extra
guaranteed
damage
guard
by having their Elrig swing twice. So,
That's how
when
I
you
think
freeze
of
an
it.
Elrig, you are able to stop multiple damage sometimes with this. That was sort of a missing piece that I think a lot of people don't run. I don't think I would run an Umir Clear in a control deck. I think I absolutely would run an Umir Clear in a tempo deck. In fact, I think it's very emblematic of the tempo deck as a whole. So, that's one of the ways that you can control the damage pace of the game. The next thing is over here. We're going to be talking about how do we strip guards away, right? And the answer is, well, oh, no. Yeah. Sorry, I made a mistake. Not strip damage away. We're going to be looking for ways to cycle through our deck. Cycling is a really, really important part of most things in WeCross, but you'll see it's much, much, much more important in tempo. In tempo decks, they have to be able to control their own pace, which means that certain cards would be dead in some matchups and better in other matchups. So what it needs to do is be able to find those tools at all points in times. Whether that's through toolboxing or cycling through its deck, usually cycling through its deck because it has a benefit of also being able to get you guards, you'll find that there's a lot of ways to do it. For example, Niru herself has 2 ways to do it. Not only does her Bond allow you to cycle through your deck and draw extra cards, but her once per game also allows you to do that. Umir Clear, again, being another emblematic card, I think, of WeCross, allows you, Tempo specifically, allows you to draw extra cards. You get rid of your whole hand to find the right cards. It just gives you unparalleled filtering to find exactly what you need. There's multiple other things that you can see with the checkboxes on this deck that allow you to also be able to filter very, very well. And yeah, so moving on. The last thing here, we're going to add those red check marks here. This is the discarders. All right, there we go. So this allows you to basically say, I am never letting my opponents have guards. Often with random discard. I highlighted over in Niru to show this off. But also Koyuki will allow you to do random discard on your opponents. and that will inevitably allow you to strip guards more efficiently. But there's also a lot of raw discard happening as well that allow you to do that. This is a great way to play a tempo deck, right? You're going to try to do all these types of things. Now, I know tempo is probably the hardest of these, in my opinion, to get because it plays like mid-range, it plays like control, it plays like aggro in many different matchups. It really does play whatever it needs to play in order to win that pace game. And sometimes it's any three of those, right? So the easiest way to understand it is I wanted to highlight a specific card in this deck. Now, I don't think Toki is an amazing card by any stretch, but I think that also highlights a thing that is a problem with tempo. It is never super powerful in what it's doing, but because it really, really, really depends on its flexibility to get itself there. And I think Toki is not a powerful card. I do think it's an incredibly flexible card. So I put some highlights on here. So for example, it is able to open up a lane. That's where you got the sword. Its shield is, it can be a 10k, which is tough to kill. So that would save you some life cloth against red decks, for example. It can gain you cards. I know it doesn't necessarily gain you cards because you're discarding a card to make it a 10k, but it filters, if you want to think about it that way, because by virtue of making it a 10k, it stays alive on the field, which means that it could potentially gain you enter, because if it's still in the field, you can use that to enter and just keep the cards in hand that you have. That's also a common trait that Toki was using at the GP. The other thing is its bond often makes your opponent low on cards in hand. You would bond it in the matchups where killing their hand is really important, like for King's Example Control, and having that option there is really good. Not to mention, if it vanishes a Signy through battle, you can do these things where it's vanishing a Signy in front of it and then opening a different lane that isn't its lane. That means that you're killing 2 cards. That means that your opponent needs to replace 2 cards, which means it's theoretical discard because it's less cards they have to work with overall. So, Toki's just a really great example of how tempo decks often function, I think, is that highlight on that flexibility of pace control. Now, let's talk about the last thing that you can do in WeCross. Combo. I think that this archetype is a way to do it. Basically, your the turn that you win doesn't really matter because your life cloth is your timer. You got to win before you're at 0 life cloth and then die. You try to cycle through your deck to find your combo or your engine pieces easily, and then you play things that will protect your combo or engine pieces. Oh, sorry. Takara Tomy showed up. He told me to stop talking. So I guess that's it for combo. Look, if you want to win with any center L-Rig, even the ones that I often say is quote-unquote a bad center L-Rig, you can. Don't just stubbornly refuse to listen to advice, though. I do think that there is a specific formula you can use to unlock the potential with any L-Rig possible and then start getting wins at your local level. You want to start with picking your favorite center, or a good one, right? You can pick just a style that you like playing, and then use that L-Rig. After that, you want to figure out what archetypes work with that center. They don't all work with each other, so you want to find which one works the best. After you do that, you build it off of the checklist that I provided in this deck, or in this video. Then you want to make your turn 0 through X game plan, just to make sure that the deck you're building is consistently doing that type of thing. After that, you fill the deck out with the rest, which is filtering, so that you can make sure that you are hitting that consistent game plan. And then after that, congratulations, you start winning games. I think that is the bare minimum ways to start winning games more than losing games in WeCross. Thank you for my TED Talk. I hope you guys all flip life bursts, but if you don't, make sure you build your decks correctly.
You're only allowed up to 20 on average. That means 4 of your cards are gonna be life burst. Let's end this video off with me adjusting and maybe playing a game. So a weakness I've been finding more and more as I kept playing uh, and changing the deck around. So the old deck was purely focused on milling both myself and my opponent. I was hoping I'd be able to refresh the opponent twice in a single game. That was how I got my extra damage. It became very apparent very quickly that that just wasn't really all that possible. So I switched to more defenses. Uh, the more defenses I put in, though, the less my Signy were being focused on milling both myself and my opponent. Milling the opponent is, of course, offensive, but milling myself was my primary form of consistency. Enter is always an issue. Enter is primarily used defensively, so I think I really should just cut Devil Hole. And this card's very good. Cards I have taken out and are sorely missing. I don't think Andralphus, because I literally never played the card to begin with. All's good, but there's a different one. Yeah, this guy. This guy still mills. It's still 4-ash. It's good whether you're going first or second. Probably just cutting this again. Mostly want to focus on being defensive on the first turn, I think. Because off my offensive hitters are when I'm level 2 and above. Then there was a great one. Italian. And this guy mills ourself or our opponent, depending on the situation. Plus, it's got life burst. Perhaps I should consider bringing it back. I'm sorely lacking in removal in my life bursts now, though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, turns out they're pretty even all around. 10 removal and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are dedicated to recovery. Which I think that they didn't talk about the life bursts, which I think is important. The effects of your life bursts are important to consider. Aggro just really wants removal, so they don't have to bother playing removal on their turn whenever possible. Of course, some recovery is still gonna be necessary. Mid range, of course, wants an even amount of both, and defensive is purely focused on recovery, as far as I can tell, with obviously still some removal since that's important, good, powerful. I tried playing stall control because Erish Kigal just seems hilarious. Like, I already do my board wipes once I reach level 4, so Erish Kigal is just redundant at that point, unfortunately, because she's hot. I'm not sure how I feel about this card. She's hot, but you use her going second so you can aggro on your first turn, going second on turn 2. Uh, you mill your deck using any of your consistency cards, like bouquet making is the first thing that comes to mind. Bouquet making clears both of the opponent's Signy that are level 1 and more likely than not already at 2000 or below. I don't know. It doesn't. It's not likely to kill though. That many things, since not a lot of things have. So there are quite a lot of Signy that are 3000 at level 1 that are played. Some are even higher. First turns should definitely be should be spent focusing on just milling and setting up our graveyard. while the later turns are spent on trying to deal damage. That's definitely how I should be playing Alpha Pure. Didn't have a win con in mind, but now I kinda do. I've been meaning to try changing restage enhance. I'm thinking of trying out what's its name again? The level 2 Sayuragi. Maybe I should consider this over the Italian? And more removal. I'm never gonna enter charge off of Fish though. Well, unlikely, but not impossible. Enter, I think, is the biggest issue of this deck. We have a lot of Signy that are quite Enter hungry. But the more I spend activating my Enter to go on the offensive, the less I'm capable of defending myself on the clapback. And there are a lot of clapbacks I need to deal with. If I just had some green demons, it could Enter charge. But I've decided the core theme is going to be that I fucking play just all the blacks. And now, let's play a game before I go have dinner. I can't decide. Loud. A little too late for me to be checking my audio. Oh, how convenient. Fine, version out of date. Fuck me. I did save my changes, right? More key format cards. I'm gonna save again. Aw. Where is everybody? These two are playing each other constantly. Rather Soyo on the grind set. What unfortunate. I need to be able to take advantage of Alpha level 3 effect, auto, in the main phase. So many of our things only mill during the during the attack phase. Hey, decided they were gonna play anyway. This opening just looks like the Delta Rune thingy. And afraid I'm unfamiliar with this. Right, the beauty signies. That is a little hard to deal with. using level 4 as well. Does this actually only work during the attack phase? Wait, what? I could thought I mailed too much. Mm. over. Yes, this isn't gonna do anything. They all have shadow. Aha, shadow. Wait, what? It worked? Alright, level 3 or higher, Signy only. No, don't disconnect, you still have a chance. Sounds so intense, where's this from? Oh wait, this is B crosses OSD.